What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another Pitching Ninja's Filthiest Pitches of the Day. Remember, before we get to those pitches, hit that subscribe button. Do it right now. Be a part of the biggest and best daily baseball show on YouTube. And now, without further ado, here are my filthiest pitches of the day. I'm going to start with Zach Davies, who had 8 Ks in 6 2/3 innings, giving up 2 earned runs. He really kept hitters off balance all day with these wicked changeups. And he faced Patrick Corbin, who had 4 Ks in 6 innings, giving up 3 runs, and had this nasty slider. Tanner Bybee had 2 Ks in 5 innings, giving up 1 earned run, and had this slider. And he faced Cutter Crawford, who had 3 Ks in 3 innings, giving up 2 earned runs, and had this splitter and elevated fastball. And of course, as usual, short, funky arm action. Jamison Tyone had 5 Ks in 5 1/3 innings, giving up 4 runs, relying on his fastballs, including his fastball at the knees, or maybe a little below the knees. He faced Jaime Barria, who had 3 Ks in 5 innings, giving up 2 runs, and this changeup and slider. Pablo Lopez had 6 Ks in 7 innings, giving up 1 run, and had these filthy sweepers. Edward Cabrera had 4 Ks in 5 innings, giving up 1 run, and his 97-mile-an-hour fastball, his absolute hammer curveballs, and his 95-mile-an-hour changeup. No doubt one of my favorite pitches in baseball. Cabrera left the game early with a blister, and hopefully he's not out too long. He faced Jordan Lyles, who had 2 Ks in 7 innings, giving up 5 runs, and had this sweeper. Connor Seabold had these sliders on his way to 4 Ks in 6 innings, giving up 2 hits and 2 runs. And he faced Logan Webb, who went 5 1/3 innings, giving up 4 runs, and only had 3 Ks, 2 coming on his sinker and slider. Michael Wacha was really good. He had 7 Ks in 6 2/3 scoreless innings, and relied on his best pitch, which is his changeup. He dominated the Mariners with that changeup and painted with it a couple times, and also worked in a few fastballs to continue to keep hitters off balance. He faced George Kirby, who was surprisingly very hittable, giving up 11 hits in 3 2/3 innings with only 3 Ks. He really worked from behind a little too much in this game, which ended up making him very predictable. Max Scherzer had 10 Ks in 5 2/3 innings. He did give up 5 earned runs and 11 hits, though. But he started out strong with his mix of sliders and changeups, as well as his overpowering fastball. Here's an overlay of his fastball and changeup, and you can see why that combination is so tough for hitters. You think you're swinging at a fastball, but if you get that changeup, it's a whiff. Scherzer faced Charlie Morton, who had 5 Ks in 4 2/3 innings, but gave up 4 earned runs. Morton relied on his buzzsaw curveballs, including this one that had 3,213 RPMs. He also threw this buzzsaw fastball that hit Alonso, although it's really hard to believe he did this on purpose, despite the chirping that went on the day before. If you ever been in a baseball dugout, that throw it again comment was pretty harmless. And you can see from Morton's reaction, he didn't mean it. Chris Bassitt had 5 Ks in 8 innings, giving up 2 runs, and he only threw 81 pitches to get through those 8 innings. He had a great pitch mix of slow breaking balls, elevated fastballs, and elevated cutters. And here's an overlay of his fastball and slow curveball. And you can really see how he keeps hitters off balance with that tunneling. Excellent work from Chris Bassitt. He faced Ronel Blanco, who relied on his sliders and got a knee buckle on this slider and had 5 Ks in 6 innings, giving up 2 runs. Jack Flaherty had 8 Ks in 6 scoreless innings. He did have 5 walks, but dominated with his breaking balls, including both his knuckle curve and slider, as well as his fastballs. He battled yesterday's co-filthiest starting pitcher of the day, Jon Gray, who had 12 Ks in 9 innings, giving up only 1 run on 4 hits. Yes, he got a 1-0 loss despite getting 12 Ks in 9 innings. He was absolutely dominant, though, with his mix of fastballs, sliders, and changeups. Just a fantastic outing from Gray. Yesterday's other co-filthiest starter of the day was Corbin Burnes. And with all the smoke on the East Coast, it's no wonder that Corbin Burnes would be featured here. Too soon? Burnes had 9 Ks in 8 scoreless innings, giving up only 2 hits and no walks. He really dominated with his cutter, including these painted and paint-ish cutters, and that cutter was moving a ton yesterday. He also worked in some filthy curveballs and got several swords. And here's an overlay that shows how his curveball and cutter work together. Here you see a cutter at the bottom of the zone for a called strike, and he follows it up with a curveball that bounces well in front of the plate. But because that curveball comes in on the same plane as that cutter, and that cutter has good velo, you're forced to make a quick decision, and sometimes you choose wrong. And because you've subscribed to this channel, here is Corbin Burnes discussing his cutter grip, as well as how sometimes it breaks a ton and sometimes not that much, depending on what day it is.
This is the cutter grip. I mean, it looks like a four-seam fastball, but you know, that's the cutter. Everyone's dying to see it, but when I tell people, I just say, hey, it's a four-seam fastball. I grip it and I'm chucking it. It's all about
like, it's kind of like I asked, you ask Devin what his changeup grip is, and he'll show you the four-seam circle change, and it's like it's the release that matters. How is your hand coming through it? What do you see? Like, do you use Edgertronic cameras and stuff? What do you think is happening when the ball's coming off your hand?
I've looked at it on Edgertronic, and it sometimes will look more sliderish coming out the hand. Sometimes it even looks like I'm getting behind it and it's still cutting. So it kind of really depends on the day. Some days I'm throwing it with just, a little baby cut. It might be a little bit harder because I'm getting behind it a little better. So it's got a little bit more rise to it. In the middle of the season, I guess middle toward the end of the season, it was probably the weeks leading up to the no-hitter where talking to Omar is like it looks like a 98-mile-an-hour slider. Like it had depth and a lot of action to it. So obviously it's not spinning as directly behind as it was earlier in the season. So it's one of those pitches that the week leading up to my start, 3 or 4 days leading up, it's kind of like, hey, what's the cutter looking like this week? Is it going to be more of a rise cutter going away, or is it going to be more of the sliderish angle? So it just kind of depends on how the arms are working. But the grip stays the same. It looks like a four-seam fastball. When you slow it down, most of the time the hand is going to be, I guess it'll look more like that coming through. It's going to be slightly on the side. Some days it's more directly behind it where I can get a more rise cut to it. So it just kind of depends. It's kind of a different look, whatever, different points of the season.
So
Yep, I'm trying to throw it the same off of both fingers, just with the slight, when I'm coming through on the side of it. So if I know if it's coming off both fingers at the same time, it's going to get this side access coming to it.
Now onto my filthiest relievers. AJ Puck K'd the side with these fastballs. Sam Bachman had these wicked sliders. Brock Stewart had these 98-mile-an-hour heaters. Plus I have to feature him because he's a Pitching Ninja fan. Cooper Criswell had this sweeper. Gallery Moreta had this slider and K power squat. I am a big fan of his K struts. Eli Morgan had this slider and Bugs Bunny changeups. Kevin Kelly got a sword on this sinker and had this cutter. Brian Abreu had this filthy slider. Taylor Rogers had these nasty sliders and fastball. Jordan Romano got the save on this 98-mile-an-hour heater. Cue the saxophone. Alexis Diaz had these sliders. Emmanuel Clase had these 101 and 100-mile-an-hour cutters. Camilo Doval had this 101-mile-an-hour heat. Speaking of heat, Jordan Hicks had his heaters up to 103 miles an hour and had this slider. And here's an overlay of his 90-mile-an-hour slider and 102-mile-an-hour two-seamer. Yeah, good luck on that. Ryan Helsley dominated with his sliders, and here's an overlay of his 101-mile-an-hour fastball and 91-mile-an-hour slider. And I don't know how anybody ever hits this dude. I'm going to give Helsley my filthiest reliever of the day, but I'm going to give him a tie with Ben Joyce just because Ben Joyce picked up his first win and worked in a pair of 103-mile-an-hour fastballs with 16 inches of run. And this is an amazing stat. Joyce has only pitched a grand total of 4 innings in his career so far, and he's already the Angels leader in fastballs of over 101 miles an hour in the entire pitch tracking era. Yep, he passed Shohei Ohtani, and he's thrown only 4 innings. And remember, Ben Joyce is only 22 years old. Will Joyce be the first pitcher to throw over 106 miles an hour in the pitch tracking era? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And now, my pitching ninja moment of zen. I don't know what's more impressive, this home run by Ellie De La Cruz or this call.
Anticipation to see what. Oh, goodness! That ball had a family!
What is up, everybody? Reminder, today is another Pitching Ninja Profit Boost token. You get a 30% Pitching Ninja Profit Boost token from FanDuel. If you didn't use it yesterday, you can use it today on any MLB straight bet. My picks of today are a 3-leg parlay. I'm going to start out with Merrill Kelly for 5Ks or more. Then take Framber Valdez for 6Ks or more. Top it off with Spencer Strider for 8Ks or more. What would your picks of the day be?